tanz in dem Glanz, viel mit Frei. Ich würde nicht noch sein, wenn ich sing, wie es klingt bei dem Tanz. Das Mädel ist aber nicht mein, weil ich tanz in mein Herz in ihr Welt. Ich mag gern noch nicht so übergestanden. Fremd ist das nicht, was ich hat. Bei dem Tanz, also ich fremd, also ich nass. Ich schmeichel, ich lach, ich tracht, als schwer ist sie lacht, wenn das Tanz ist versteht. Ich tanz, mein Herz in mir sucht. Vergiss in den Blick, öffnen tut. Ich gedenk, erst nicht lang ist du's gewesen. In Garten, in Blumen, a Pracht. Wie getanzt, bin gelacht, a ganze Nacht. Wie a Chulem ist du's noch gewesen. Weil ich tanz in mein Herz in mir gefällt. Ich mag gern noch nicht so übergestanden. Fremd ist das Leben, was ich hab. Bei dem Tanz, als ich fremd, als ich tanz. Ich schmecke, ich lach, ich tracht, als schwer ist sie lacht, wenn das Herz ist versteht. Als ich tanz in mein Herz in mir sucht. Vergiss in den Blick, öffnen wenn ich tanz in dem Glanz, viel mit Frei. Ich würde nicht noch sein, wenn ich sing, wie es klingt bei dem Tanz. Das Mädel ist aber nicht mein, weil ich tanz in mein Herz in ihr Welt. Ich mag gern noch nicht so übergestanden. Fremd ist das Leben, was ich hat. Bei dem Tanz, also ich fremd, also ich nass. Ich schmeichel, ich lach, ich tracht, als schwer ist sie lacht, wenn das Herz ist versteht. Ich tanz, mein Herz in mir sucht. Vergiss in den Blick, öffnen tut. gedenkt, erst nicht lang ist du's gewesen. Ein Garten von Blumen, a Pracht, wie getanzt, ihn gelacht, a ganze Nacht, wie a Chulem ist du's nur gewesen. Weil ich tanz in mein Herz in mir rein. Ich vergesse noch nicht so übergestanden. Fremd ist das Leben, was ich hat. Bei dem Tanz, als ich fremd, als ich tanz. Ich schmecke nicht lang, ich tracht, als schwer ist zu lachen, wenn das Herz ist versteht. Als ich tanze, mein Herz ist so. Vergiss in den Brief, wenn ich tanz in dem Glanz, fühl mich frei. Ich wirklich nur sein, wenn ich sing, wie es klingt bei dem Tag. Das Lied ist aber nicht mein, weil ich tanz in mein Herz in mir weht. Ich mag gern noch nicht so übergestand. Fremd ist das Leben, was ich hat. Bei dem Tanz, als ich fremd, als ich nass. Ich schmeichel, ich lach, ich tracht, als schwer ist zu lachen, wenn das Herz ist versteht. Ich tanze, mein Herz in mir so. Vergiss in den Blick und tu. Ich gedenkt, erst nicht lang ist du's gewesen. Ein Garten von Blumen, a Pracht, wie getanzt, ihn gelacht, a ganze Nacht, wie a Chulem ist du's nur gewesen. Weil ich tanz in mein Herz in mir rein. Ich vergesse noch nicht so übergestanden. Fremd ist das Leben, was ich hat. Bei dem Tanz, als ich fremd, als ich tanz. Ich schmecke nicht lang, ich tracht, als schwer ist zu lachen, wenn das Herz ist versteht. Als ich tanze, mein Herz in mir so. Vergiss.
All right, forgive me.
I am trying to make this happen technologically. Sholem Aleichem, alle meine Chaverim. So here we are at beautiful Gallery 22, preparing any moment to begin another wonderful lecture here at Yaakov Heller's studio, surrounded by such beautiful art. And I am desperately trying to make this work. And I don't want that to happen because I'm not ready. So just give me a second to deal with the technology, please. There you go. Now, there you have it. All right. So, Shalom Aleichem, Ale. My name is Avi Hoffman. Some of you may know me. And we are here today at Gallery 22, Yaakov Heller's beautiful studio in downtown Boca Raton. And today we have a very special program called the Yiddish Shakespeares. And tonight I will introduce you to some of the writers. Some of you may know them, others may not. But hopefully by the end of the evening you will all be quite impressed with how deep some of these Yiddish writers and poets were, and why they may have been compared to Shakespeare, not by me, but by many other writers and poets and contemporaries of their time. Before I start, today we picked this beautiful piece by Yaakov, showing all the different people of the world, all races, creeds, colors, ages, children of all ages holding hands together. And the words here in the middle say, if we are to have real peace on earth, our loyalties must transcend our race, our tribe, our class, and our nation. And this means that we must develop a world perspective, said Martin Luther King Jr. Tolerance means respecting the differences in people. My religion is very simple. My religion is kindness, said the Dalai Lama. If we are to teach real peace in the world, and if we are to carry on a real war against war, we shall have to begin with the children, said Mahatma Gandhi. Tolerance is giving to every other human being every right that you claim for yourself, said Robert Ingersoll. And despite everything, I believe that people are really good at heart. And I think you all know who said that, Anne Frank. So here we are today with our sponsors, the George Feldenkrais Program in Judaic Studies and the Sue and Leonard Miller Center for Contemporary Judaic Studies, both at the University of Miami. We are Why I Love Jewish. And without any further ado, I'd like to begin our lecture, because it's all about bringing the world together and celebrating identity and celebrating our own individual cultures. So our Yiddish literature has never lost contact with its Jewish folk life and consequently with Yiddish folklore. There was a very famous Israeli poet named Chaim Nachman Bialik. He wrote in Hebrew, but sometimes in Yiddish, and he said, as long as the soul moves man and longs for light and hungers for beauty, men will need poetry. And so Shakespeare's work was done in the Yiddish theater by the great stars from Boris Tomaszewski to Bertha Kalish and Jacob P. Adler. Let's see if you can recognize this famous soliloquy done in Yiddish for the Yiddish theater. Zu sein oder nicht zu sein, da liegt der Hund begraben. Wer sagt es, es ist ein Teinung, euch zu stehen, das Kalts und Warms von dem paskudem Geurl, sie sich entgegenstellen, dem Berg mit Zorris, und nehmen soll es Sof. Zum ganzen Schabbesgeudel und Meuchel glicken mit dem ganzigsten Kabudel. Now, you may recognize that better in Shakespeare's original language, to be or not to be? That is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles and by opposing end them. To die, to sleep, no more, and by asleep to say we end the heartache and the thousand natural shocks that flesh is heir to. 'Tis a consummation devoutly to be wished, to die, to sleep, perchance to dream. Aye, there's the rub. That, of course, is from Hamlet, the Prince of Denmark, der Prins von Dänemark. And while he wrote that, wrestling with himself and with the essence of life itself. Now, the great Yiddish writers of the 20th century were forced to struggle with the concept of life itself and man's humanity and man's inhumanity. So tonight, I would like to introduce you to a small selection of these amazing writers whose works are being rediscovered and recognized for their depth and their magnitude. This is our first Yiddish Shakespeare. He was known as the great Avrom Sutzkever. He was born in 1913 and he survived the Vilna ghetto by hiding with the partisans in the forests around Vilna. And after the Holocaust, he served as a witness at the Nuremberg trials. He was well known by millions of Yiddish-speaking Jews around the world. And in 1944, Stalin sent a plane to bring him to Moscow from his hiding place in the forest. That's how well known and well loved he was. After the war, he settled in Israel, where he died in 2010. And I actually had the honor of knowing Avrom Sutzkever personally. He actually gave me one of his works, a book called Siberia. He gave it to me for my bar mitzvah. And I had no idea how important it was, but I still have it. And what makes it unique is that, number one, there are only 50 copies in the entire world, and all the illustrations in that book, in that poem called Siberia, were illustrated by one of his friends, an artist. You may recognize him as Marc Chagall. Every year, Sutzkever was recommended for the Nobel Prize in Literature. But Nelly Sachs, who wrote in German, and Shai Agnon, who wrote in Hebrew, were the eventual recipients of the Nobel. Perhaps had Sutzkever written in a language other than Yiddish, he would have been recognized as the world literary figure that he deserved to be. As a result, he wrote the following poem. It's called Yiddish. Soll ich onheben von onheb? Soll ich wie Avrom ois Bruderschaft zerhacken alle Getzen? Should I begin from the very beginning? Should I, just like Abraham, out of brotherhood, destroy all the idols? Soll ich sich a lebendiger Losen übersetzen? Soll ich einpflanzen mein Zung und warten, bis verwandeln, wird sie sich in a ovesdicke Rojinkes und Mandeln? Should I allow myself to be translated while still alive? Should I plant my tongue and wait until it turns, as our forefathers did, into raisins and almonds? Was for katovis? Witzen darschend mein Poesiebruder mit die Backenboden. How amusing! You're joking, preaches my brother poet with his sideburns. As mein Mameloschen geht bald unter, that my mother tongue is on the way out. Mir will noch in 100 Jahre rum, do, kennt ich sitzen, und führen die Diskussie bei den Milliarden. Within 100 years, we will still sit here at the shores of the Jordan River and debate. So soll mir a Steiger anweisen, wohin die Sprach geht unter, efscher beim Keusel am Aruvi. Then let him, as a matter of fact, tell me in which direction my language is going under. Could it be at the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem? Oi bazoi, will ich dort kommen, öffnen das Mäul und wie ein Leib, angetan in feierdicken Zunter, einschlingen das Loschen, was geht unter, einschlingen und alle Deures wecken mit mein Brummen. If that is the case, I will be there. I will be there, and I will open wide my mouth, just like a lion, dressed in fiery tinder, and I will swallow up the language that's going under. Swallow it up and wake all the generations with my roar. And now here is Yaakov Heller to tell you about one of his beautiful pieces. Oh, no, I'm sorry. All right, well, I was wrong about Yaakov. We're going to see Yaakov after the next Shakespeare. This is my personal favorite of the Yiddish Shakespeares, the most popular and most beloved Yiddish poet, whose songs are still included in the repertoires of almost all of the Yiddish singers in the world. His name is Itzik Manger. He was born in 1901 in Yas, Romania. He survived the Holocaust by escaping to Paris, London, and finally New York, but he eventually died alone and destitute in Israel in 1969. Manger has always been our knight in shining armor, and for me personally, a source of all that I love about Yiddish language and culture. He was represented on Broadway in 1968 with a big Broadway production called The Megillah of Itzik Manger, the first Broadway show that I ever saw, starring Mike Burstyn, a dear friend of mine and Yaakov's, and Mike's parents, Lillian and Pesachke. Mike's performance in that show made me want to be an actor. And I memorized the entire show, and I think to this day, I could probably recite most of that show by heart. I was a child. And since the early 1980s, I have also performed a one-man show about his life and his works entitled Reflections of a Lost Poet. But Manger's words will speak for themselves. He wrote a beautiful poem called Ich hab sich Jorden gewalgert. For years, I have wandered. Ich hab sich Jorden gewalgert in der Fremd. Itzt, vor ich sich walgern in der Heim, mit ein Paar Schirch, ein Hemd auf dem Leib, in der Hand a Stecken. Wie kann ich sein ohne dem? For years, I've wandered among strangers, but now I can wander in my own home. With one pair of shoes and one shirt on my back, in my hand a cane, without it, I'm lost. Ich will nicht kuschen dein Stäub, wie jener größer Poet, Chotsch mein Herz is full mit Gesang und Gewehn. I will not kiss your dust, as the other great poet did, although my heart is full of song and woe. Was heißt kuschen dein Stäub? Ich bin dein Stäub. Und wer kuscht es? Ich bete euch, sich allein. What do I mean by kissing your dust? I am your dust. And who kisses, you'll excuse me, who kisses oneself? Verleuston die Schier und dem Treuer und kommen zu dir zurück. Ota so wie ich bin, a Verspielter, und stellen sich vor dein Blick. I shall take off my shoes and my sorrow and come back like that to you. I will come as I am, a loser, and stand up for you to view. Mein Gott, mein Haar, mein Beschaffer, leiter mich aus in dein Schein. Ot lieg ich vor dir, auf Wolken, verwieg mich und schläfer mich ein. My God, my Lord, my Creator, purify me in your light. Here I lie on a cloud before you. Rock me to sleep in the night. Und red zu mir gute Wörter. Und sag mir, als ich bin dein Kind. Und kusch mir herab von dem Stern die Zeichens von meine Sinn. And speak to me words of kindness. My child, my son, you will say. And with a kiss on my brow, take the signs of my sins away. Ze bin ich denn schuldig der Leuchter, was bin ich der Schlagen und Mied und leg dir weg zu Fußens das dosike Miede Lied. Is it my fault? Or did it just happen that I'm so lost and forlorn and beat? So here is the last weary poem that I am placing at your feet. Mein Gott, mein Haar, mein Beschäfer, leiter mich aus in dein Schein. Dort lieg ich vor dir auf der Wolken, verwieg mich und schläfer mich ein. My God, my Lord, my Creator, purify me in your light. Here I lie on a cloud before you. Rock me to sleep in the night. And that deserves to be compared to the great William Shakespeare. Munger was known as an alcoholic, and he was often found lying unconscious on the Bowery in New York City. The Yiddish community finally sent him to Israel in the hope that he would rehabilitate. He did, however, have a sense of humor about his predicament, and he wrote a poem that he called Mein Tzavoy, My Last Will and Testament. In dem Schenkel, wie ich pfleg trinken, dort bei Erden sollt ihr mir. Und a vollen Fass mit Bronfen sollt ihr wegstellen, leben mir. At the pub that I used to drink in, that's where you should bury me, with a barrel full of whiskey standing right in front of me. Nicht kein Glecker soll klingen, wenn beerdigt will ich sein. Nur mit Becher sollt ihr klingen und begießen mich mit Wein. There's no need for bells to go ringing when you come to bury me. Only make your glasses ring out and douse me with some Burgundy. Liegen will ich ausgezeug mit die Fies zu der Wand. Und a Becher voll mit Bronfen sollt ihr losen in mein Hand. I will lie there, all stretched out with my feet against the wall. Put a tumbler full of whiskey in my hand. And that is all. Kritzt nicht auf mein Matzeve von jene Jorden, wer und was. Kritzt nur ois mit größe Oisies, als Manger hat lieb gehabt dem Kuss. Don't carve out Upon my tombstone, all those dates, the wheres and whos, just carve out in big, great big letters that Munger loved his booze. And that, my friends, is Itzik Munger. And now here is Yaakov Heller to tell you about one of his beautiful pieces.
Here we have one of my signature pieces, is the Fiddler on the Roof. And here he's fiddling on the roof of the Knesset in Jerusalem. And this is Jerusalem as what they describe in Israel. They say Aliyah. This is Jerusalem is the entire world. There's nothing outside of Jerusalem. This is the whole world, Jerusalem. And you have all the details of the wall, the old city wall, and all the detail of Jerusalem in sterling silver, electroform that I make, and a foundry I set up back in the 1970s in Israel. And I'm still doing it today, and the foundry is still open with grandchildren. Not my grandchildren, but grandchildren of people I set it up with are still working there.
Thank you so much, Yaakov. What a beautiful piece. And if you are interested in any of Yaakov Heller's artwork, whether it's from this lecture, any previous lectures, go to our website, whyilovejewish.org, and you'll see the merchandise button, and you'll see many of Yaakov's pieces that are available for purchase. And you can also go to Yaakov Heller's direct website, yaakovheller.com. So whyilovejewish.org and yaakovheller.com to see the magnificent artwork of the great artist and my friend, Yaakov Heller. Our next Yiddish Shakespeare. One of the few renowned female Yiddish poets, Kadia Molodovsky. I actually met Kadia when she was in New York when I was a child. Born in 1894 in Belarus, Kadia was a poet. She was a writer and a teacher of Yiddish and Hebrew. She published 6 collections of poetry during her lifetime and was a widely recognized figure in Yiddish poetry during the 20th century. Considered the best-known Yiddish female writer, she was also known as an editor, a critic, a playwright, and a short story writer. And consider that during those years, it was very hard for a woman to break through into that good old boys club of Yiddish poets. She traveled throughout Poland and Ukraine, studying, writing, teaching, and working with young orphaned refugees. One of her most powerful poems is called El Chanon, Merciful God, where she questions the Jewish people's designation as the chosen. El Chanon, Kleibois, an ander Volk, derweil, wir seinen Miet von Starben und gestorben. Oh, merciful God, choose another people for the time being. We are tired of death and dying. Wir haben nicht kein Tfilis mehr. Kleibois an ander Volk, derweil. Wir haben nicht kein Blut mehr, auf zu sein a Kolben. We have no more prayers left. Choose another people for the time being. We have run out of blood to be the victims. Und noch ein Chesed tu uns, El Chanon. Nimm zu von uns die Schiene von Geunis. And one more favor grant us, O merciful God of ours. Please take back the divine glory of our genius. Kadya Molodovsky. Our great next Yiddish Shakespeare is the Yiddish writer Chaim Grade. He was born in Vilna, now Vilnius, Lithuania, in 1910, and he is still considered one of the leading Yiddish writers of the 20th century. Raised by Orthodox parents, he studied in a yeshiva as a teenager, but he ended up in the secular world, losing many of his family members in the Holocaust. He eventually resettled in New York, and he increasingly took to fiction, writing in Yiddish. He was reluctant to have his works translated, as many Yiddish poets. And it is said that had his works been translated into English, he would have won the Nobel Prize, just like Sutzkever. Nobel laureate Elie Wiesel praised Grade as, quote, one of the great, if not the greatest, of living Yiddish novelists. In 1970, he was awarded the Itzik Manger Prize for his lifetime contributions to Yiddish literature. The irony, of course, is Itzik Manger died in 1969, and it wasn't until after his death that Golda Meir named a great literary prize after him. Professor Irving Howe even compared his short essay, My Quarrel with Herr Schraziner, to Shakespeare's Hamlet. Now, I don't remember Chaim Grade personally, but my mother tells me that he actually came to visit our home in New York City. And so she knew him. And he was indeed one of the greatest Yiddish writers of all time. I did, however, do a play based on his quarrel with Herschel Hazainer that I just mentioned, written by Rabbi Joseph Telushkin, adapted by Telushkin, called The Quarrel. And it is a stunning story of an Orthodox man and a secular man who were best of friends before the war in the shtetl. They were both Orthodox. And then the Holocaust came. They were both taken to the camps, and they both survived. And they didn't know that the other had survived. They meet randomly in a park in Montreal, and one has become an ultra-Orthodox rabbi, the other an ultra-secular writer and journalist. And they quarrel, and it is quite stunning. The following poem, however, denounces his compatriot, the Vilna poet Abba Kovnev, who penned the phrase, they went like sheep to the slaughter. Chaim Grade was not happy about that particular designation. So he wrote his own answer to his compatriot poet, and he called it Choreve Kloisen, destroyed prayer houses. Verwus hast du sich nicht entgegengestellt? Schreist du hast gerettet dein Leben? Jetzt willst du als mir, die Umgekommene, sollen euch retten dein eingeretten Covid? Du sollst doch kennen Barimen vor der Welt, als du bist der Letzte von die vertilgte Helden. Why didn't you resist? You want to know? You saved your own life, while you demand of us, the ones who perished, to have saved your conceited dignity and honor. so that you could brag to the outside world that you are the last of the exterminated heroes? Wir sind gewesen bei Hungen mit Kinder, mit Weiber und alte Tate Mame. Man hat uns gepeinigt. Wir sollen verlieren dem Zählem Elohim, mot uns ausgetan nacket. Und du monst von uns Heldigkeit. We, who carried our young on our shoulders, our wives and our old folks, we who were tortured to the point of losing our image of God, we who were stripped naked of us, you demand chivalry? Wir mit unserer teute Hand sollen unterhalten dein Chashives bei die Umes Ha'oilem, was fallen Korim for Koyach und nicht for Yesurim. We, with our dead hands, should have upheld your dignity among the nations of the world, who prostrate themselves before power, but not before those who suffer. Und deine Chaverim und die Marchokim und in der freien Welt, was haben sie getan? Haben sie sich geworfen, die Völker zu die Fies und gebeten für uns Rettung? And what about all your pals from afar, as well as the free world? What have they done? Did they get down on all fours, pleading for our rescue? Pavos hat ihr nicht belagert, die Manhigim von die Maluches? Pavos hat ihr sich nicht ausgelegt auf die Gassen? Die Welt soll nicht kennen, a rübergehen über unser Harige. Why didn't you surround the mighty and powerful of the world? Why didn't you line the streets with your bodies to prevent the world from walking over our massacre? Warum hast du sich allein nicht verhungert zum Tod, jeden Tag, jede Schuh, jede Rege und nicht gerissen Krieg, jeden Tag, jeder Schuh, jede Rege? Why didn't you starve yourself to death? Why didn't you tear your garments for our dead every single day, every single hour, every single moment? Du hast kein jiddische Messias Nefesh, für uns nicht herausgewiesen. Und bei uns munst du Esav's Gevure? Where was your Jewish devotion to us? And of us, you demand Esau's might? Wer es sagt, als mir seinen Chayev für unsere Schwachkeit, der hat nicht kein Rachmunes in sein Herzen. He who says that we are responsible for our weakness has no compassion in his heart. Chaim Grade. He fled Vilna at the start of the Second World War, while his mother and his wife remained behind, stranded. They did not survive. And Chaim Grade struggled with this for the rest of his life, creative and otherwise. And then he wrote a poem. He wrote a poem for his mother. And it's called Zu der Mame, to my mother. Sie ist klein, sie ist da und greift kaum zu mein Achsel. Nur sie ist in ihr Zar alle übergewachsen. She is small, she is thin, and hardly reaches my shoulder. Although in her grief she outgrew me, she is much, much bolder. Amamale, taibale groye, mit Augen voll Schreck und Hachnoe. Und in Wind und in Finsternis lieg ich und dich wie ein Eufale wieg ich. Oi, mamale, gray dove of mine, with eyes full of fear and so humble. The wind and the darkness surround me, and like an infant I rock you, and I mumble. Auf mein Hals liegt ihr Kopf, ich wisch euch ihre Tränen, und ihre Hand wischt darauf kalten Schweiß von mein Stern. Rest your head on my heart as I wipe away your tears, while her hand wipes away the cold sweat of my fears. Ich her von der Weiten ihr Klagen, mein Sohn, du sollst alles übertragen. Ich zeil auf ihr Ponem die Karben, sollst Mame von Bänkschaft nicht sterben. I hear from afar her wailing. My son, bear it all, live, survive. I count the wrinkles on her face. Mother, please, do not die of longing. The great Chaim Grad. And now, a short word from our wonderful sponsor, Yaakov Heller and Gallery 22.
Now we're going to go on to the painting that I did of Jerusalem. This is the old city of Jerusalem, the Tower of David, the citadel, as it stands today outside the old city walls at the Jaffa Gate. And here you're looking out on the new city of Jerusalem. You're looking out here on Mamilla, which is now such a beautiful project. You have here King David Street, where I had my gallery at 22 King David Street for many years. From 1977 to 1990, actually, I had a gallery right there across from the King David Hotel. So this is very moving and emotional to me. I raised my family here, and there's also my daughters. I brought them back here to go to school, but then they went back to Israel. You can take the kid out of the country, but you can't take the country out of the kid. And that's my daughters. I speak with them regularly. I spoke with my daughter, Natalie, today. They all moved to Tel Aviv, but they were all born and raised in Jerusalem. So Jerusalem is an important piece to me. It's signed. This is the only one. It's got gold leaf here and there and acrylic paint. I painted it with acrylic. Offering it to all you people who love Jerusalem, who love Israel, and who love Jewish.
Thank you so much, Yaakov. I just want to say that Yaakov's art inspires me for so many reasons. Now, I'm sitting here in the studio looking at many of the other pieces of his artwork, his Marilyn Monroes and his Elton Johns and all these amazing Connie Francis. But his Jewish art comes from such a deep spiritual place, a very soul place. And so, again, I hope you will visit his website, yaakovheller.com. I hope you'll visit our website, whyilovejewish.org, and our merchandise page, and you'll see the great and beautiful and inspiring work of Yaakov Heller. Our last Yiddish Shakespeare this evening is Yaakov Gladstein. Jacob Yankiv Gladstein. He was born in Lublin, in Poland, in 1896. And he belonged to a poetic movement in New York that was known as the introspective poetic movement, the Insichisten, in sich, in themselves. They were interested in themselves. They were introverted, introspective. His family identified with the Jewish Enlightenment movement, but he actually received a very traditional education until about the age of 16, and that's when he was introduced to modern Yiddish literature. In 1914, due to increasing anti-Semitism in Lublin, he immigrated to New York City, where he lived with his uncle. He worked in the sweatshops, and he studied English, and he actually studied law at NYU, at New York University, in 1918. He wrote a poem called Without Jews, which was translated by another great Jewish writer named Cynthia Ozick. Many of you may know of Cynthia Ozick. On Yidden, without Jews. On Yidden wird nicht sein kein jiddischer Gott. Gehen mir Cholila weg von der Welt, verlöscht sich das Licht von dein Ohren gezählt. Without Jews, there shall be no Jewish God. Once we are gone, your light will not go on. Sind Avrom hat dich in Wolken derkennt, hast du auf alle jüdische Peinemel gebrennt, von alle jüdische Augen gestrahlt, und wir haben dich geformt in unser Gestalt. In jedem Land, in jeder Stadt ist mit uns euch gewesen a Ger, der jüdische Gott. Since Abraham knew you in the clouds, every Jewish face was proud and aflame with you. You were ablaze in all the Jewish eyes, and we formed you in our likeness. In every land, in every town, you, the stranger, accompanied us. You, our Jewish God. I'm always amazed at the depth of Yiddish literature and poetry. Many people in the world today think that Yiddish is a language that is really supposed to be funny. You know, you say Schlemiel and everybody laughs. You say Schlemazel or Spiel or Schmaltz or Schlepp, Shtick. You know, Yiddish is a very funny language. There's no doubt. Some of the greatest comedians came from the world of Yiddish, Yiddish vaudeville, Yiddish theater. Some of the greatest comedic writers wrote in Yiddish and the Yiddish style. But most people don't seem to realize how incredibly beautiful and deep and rich the Yiddish literature and Yiddish poetry really is. And so tonight we've introduced you to some of the very, very deep and dark Yiddish Shakespeares, like Yankel Gladstein and Gadia Molodovsky, Chaim Grade, Avram Sutzkever, and Itzik Manger. But I didn't want to leave you on a very serious note, so we're going to end the event, the poetry of tonight's event, with a humorous side of Yankiv Gladstein, who, because he grew up in New York in the 60s and the 70s, experienced the flower children down in the village, in Greenwich Village. And so he wrote a poem that celebrated the new feminist movement. And he called the poem Grimpel Grimpel, which means strum, like a guitar. They were all sitting with their guitars in Washington Square Park, singing folk songs. It was an amazing era, and he was right there to celebrate it. So he wrote, Macht Savare, Für der jiddischer Moid mit der Gitarre. Grimpel, Grimpel. Make a splash for the Jewish flaunty maiden with her guitar. Strum, strum. Bewundert ihr exhibitischen Mut. Es ihr noch kein Mal nicht gewesen, also gut mit ihr Geschlecht. Grimpel, Grimpel, marvel at her exhibitionistic courage. Never was she so well off with her gender. Strum, strum. Seit sie hat sich von Tate Mame abgenoppelt, ist sie toppelt. Sie kann sein bemannt und beweibt, Grimpel, Grimpel, ever since she severed her umbilical cord away from her folks, she has doubled. She can be by husband and by wifed, strum, strum. Tomer verzeppet sich etwas und verbleibt. Weist sie jedes Mal, wie man treibt ob dem weiberischen Oll. Grimpel, Grimpel. So, in case something got stuck in her privates, she's an expert by now of how to rid herself of her womanly burden. Strum, strum. And I find it fascinating that, you know, we live in an era today of gay marriage and gender identity being accepted, and we hope that the rest of the world will learn to accept those who are different, who feel differently, are born differently, different races, colors, creeds, sexual identity, gender identity. But here was a poet, a Yiddish poet named Gladstein, who in the late 60s and before he died in 1971, was able to recognize how that movement was starting to move in that direction, how that acceptance was starting to become part of the Yiddish society as well as the society at large. So those are our Yiddish Shakespeares, and I hope that you will agree with me that that it is warranted to compare them with a William Shakespeare. Their works are so very powerful. And so we close the evening with another beautiful and powerful piece of art brought to you by the great Jewish artist Yaakov Heller from Gallery 22.
This is a Hanukkah menorah. A Hanukkah menorah with Jerusalem on this side of it. A lot of detail in Jerusalem. And on the other side, you have the Kotel, the Western Wall. And this is a soldier who is taking his oath of allegiance and swearing in his gun at the wall, saying that he will sacrifice his life for Israel and the Jewish people, and the Jewish state. And I'm familiar with this because I was also in the Israeli army. I was also in basic training. And we went as a group, as a unit, after basic training, and we swore on our guns at the Western Wall. So I'm very familiar with this, and I had to capture it and talk about it. It's sterling silver, it swivels, it's only used for 8 days a year, Hanukkah, but the rest of the year, you have a sculpture of the soldier at the wall. So on a granite base, his helmet, his gun, the wall as it is today, And Jerusalem, you even have details like the windmill in Yamin Moshe. You have the Mosque of Omar. You have all the walls of the old city of Jerusalem, the different gates, a lot of detail. But most of the year, with the exception of 8 days, you have it facing this way.
Thank you so much, Yaakov. And I think you all agree with me that his work, Yaakov Heller's work, is so full of Yiddishkeit, of soul. And I don't want to embarrass him, but I truly believe that he may be the greatest Jewish artist living today. And I hope we will have an opportunity to introduce you to many more wonderful works of art. We will return next Tuesday, right here at Gallery 22, with a hilarious look at the relationship between Yiddish and English in our program called Celebrating Yinglish. And it's lots of fun because I don't want people to get the impression that Yiddish is only serious, heavy, downer, Holocaust, or, you know, there is a lot of fun to be had with Yiddish and English. And don't forget that Labor Day week from September 7th to the 13th, we are going to bring you our celebrity-studded inaugural international all virtual Why I Love Yiddish Fest. 7 days of celebration. We're going to have world premiere movie screenings, including a movie about Yaakov Heller creating a bust, a beautiful sculpture of Benjamin Ferencz, the prosecutor at the Nuremberg trials. We're going to have world premiere movie screenings, concerts, world premiere concerts being done for us by Frank London and Yale Strom and Michael Winograd and Josh Dolgan in Toronto, Daniel Kahn in Germany, all over the world, Efim Chorny in Moldova. We will have people in the United Kingdom, Paulina Shepard and Yana Mazurevich out in Los Angeles. We're going to have lectures and play readings with celebrities. We've actually been given the rights to present the world premiere reading of a new play called My Mother, My Sister, and Me by Sherry Heller. And it will star the great Broadway actress Lonnie Ackerman, who many of you may remember from the great musical Cats. She was Grisabella. She was also in Evita. And the project is directed by Richard Klein, who was in Three's Company. And we are doing a virtual concert of Stars of David, the musical Stars of David, based on the great book by Abigail Pogrebin. And Abigail will be with us after the concert, and we'll ask her about all the interviews she did with the greatest, most respected and loved Jewish celebrities in the world, including Steven Spielberg and Kenneth Cole and Andy Cohen, and the list goes on and on and on, where she asked them how they feel about being Jewish. And the answers are stunning, and some of the answers may surprise you. It is a celebration of Jewish identity. So please, we have so many wonderful people joining our festival. And so if you're on our mailing list, you will find out more and more information. We're planning to simulcast live on our website, our YouTube channel, and here on Facebook, on our Yiddishkeit Initiative Facebook page, and in our clubs and groups. And so hopefully we'll see you there. Please visit our website, which is the letters Y I Love Jewish.org. It's pretty simple, and you'll see the many programs that we bring to you in the virtual world of Yiddishkeit. And so without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to wish you a shenim und hartzigen Dank, a very beautiful and heartfelt wrong button, a beautiful and heartfelt thanks. A sincere and very heartfelt thank you. I wish you all to seid gesund und stark. Especially nowadays in the era of COVID, you have to be healthy and strong, all right? And that means, please, wear a mask, socially distance, wash your hands, stay safe, stay strong, and protect yourself and protect all of those around you. So this is a very interesting time we live in. Wasn't that a Chinese curse? You should live in interesting times. And unfortunately, we are living in very, very interesting times. Sometimes I wish the times weren't quite as interesting, but I am very grateful that because of the COVID, we are now doing more and more virtual programs, and people from all over the world are joining with us to celebrate Jewish identity, Jewish culture, to take pride in who we are and share it with the rest of the world. Our Yiddish conversational classes, Yiddish Fun 01 and Yiddish Fun 02, which we only started a few months ago, have now had over 250 students. Our videos on Facebook have been viewed by over 100,000 people. If you add all of them up, it's probably closer to 200,000 people. And so we are growing, and we are offering our festival entirely free to the public. Almost everything we do is free, because especially nowadays, we know how tight money is for so many of you out there. And so we want to continue bringing our free programming to everyone. So if you can, please go to our website and support our work. If you know other people who love being Jewish, send them to whyilovejewish.org and encourage them to support us. If you want to be a sponsor of any of our work, please contact me directly at avi@whyilovejewish.org. That's my email. And I will gladly reply to you personally. We are seeking all of those around the world who love being Jewish, who love the Jewish people, and who love the concept that no matter who you are, no matter where you come from, no matter your race, creed, or color, no matter your gender, no matter what, we are all equal, and we have to celebrate each other. We have to celebrate each other's cultures. We have to learn to accept each other the way we are, who we are, and from whence we came. And so thank you for being with us tonight and our Yiddish Shakespeare program. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next week, same time, same Facebook page, same Zoom, and Ashenim und herzlichen Dank. Seid gesund und stark.
Again.